Mute myself right now.
So welcome, everybody. I'm Alan Shukat, and I'm delighted to introduce Aaron Ginsburg tonight. Aaron has been a very active member of the Society. He has traveled to Ukraine and Belarus several times, and he's spoken to the Ukraine and Belarus SIGs about his visits. Among other places, he's been to Dakshitsi in Belarus, and I think he's going to mention that tonight. He's also been to Makarev in Ukraine, and he was written up in a local Ukrainian newspaper, complete with photograph. Tonight he's going to talk about the Joint Distribution Committee. What is it, and how can I use its archives? If you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll handle them at the end of the talk. And you know this is being recorded. The recording will be available on the members portion of our website afterward. Aaron, all yours.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. We'll start by sharing my screen. Okay, and this picture was taken on one of my trips to Hustyatyn, which is in Ukraine. I'm on the roof of a synagogue, and I'm holding on for dear life. I first want to address Zoom etiquette. I think I'm following the etiquette, and the last time I checked, I noticed that I did have my pants on. Now, just a word about terminology. We're talking about the American Joint Distribution Committee, but we can abbreviate that by calling it the Joint or the JDC, and that's probably I'll probably be using all three of those names for it. This is a rough outline of my presentation. I'm going to start with two examples. I'll discuss the founding of the Joint Distribution Committee, which took place during World War I. I'll discuss its activities during and immediately after World War I. I'll briefly mention the other things it's done, and then we'll look at a few more examples to learn how to search the archives. Now, this is the homepage of the Joint Distribution Committee. If we look under the tab Rescuing Jews, we see at the bottom here, there's a document about liberating children from 2 internment camps. So why don't we take a look at that? So this is the first page, the top of the first page of the document. And if you look at the second blue arrow, you'll see it mentions one of the camps, which was in Gurs. Now, so what do we know about Gurs? The Gurs camp, according to the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, was one of the first and largest camps established in pre-war France, pre-World War II France. It was located at the foot of the Pyrenees, near the village of Gurs. It was 50 miles from the Spanish border. It was established in April 1939 to serve as a detention camp for refugees and political refugees and members of people fleeing the Spanish Civil War. In 1940, they used it to house German Jewish refugees as enemy aliens. Many people, they continued to be used during the Holocaust, and it had a lot of a high death rate, but some people were rescued. So why don't we investigate Gurs and see what we can find out. So I'm going to search Gurs for a very important reason. as you notice here, results are capped at 500 items. I don't think we're going to find 500 items about GERS. So let's try it. If you search Cohen, I can guarantee you would probably find 5,000 hits, including the ones that involved an employee of the JDC or more than one whose last name was Cohen. So there's 152 hits. This is the first page. And it shows 3 hits here. It's part of the first page. We're going to look at the third one. It's blown up on the right. It's an index card. And all we can tell from this is somebody's accompanied by Marguerite Bloch, and the primary name is Leopold Bloch. So if we click on the numbers, we can get into the details. When we click, we get 2 things. We get this description that's on the left, and then we can further click on the link at the top in blue and see the actual document. So we can see that Leopold was born in GERS. In other words, he was born in the camp on May 14th, 1943. And this is from the AJDC, American Joint Distribution Committee, Immigration Service, and he's in transit, and he's accompanied by Marguerite Bloch, and the child's name is Leopold Bloch. Why don't we look on Ancestry.com and see what else we can find out about Leopold Bloch. So if we go to Ancestry, we get exactly 1 hit. It's a document, really it's a ship's manifest, or an extract from a ship's manifest. And it tells us that in 1950, he left Genoa, Italy, for Montreal, Canada. He was 6 years old. So this is the actual document. It's a list of passengers. This is on Ancestry. It's a list of passengers of displaced persons. And their line is at the blue line. And we can see that his mother must have been Marguerite. She was born in Germany. The town is Gukaluvu, and I could not find any information about that. And he was born in GERS, and she was a waitress. Let's try another example. Now we're still on the homepage of the Joint Distribution Committee. When we go to About, we can find a way of searching the names on their documents. So why don't we try Schultz? Now for this, we've got 100 hits. So we're just going to look at one of them. This is just an example. So it's the 5th one down. It's blown up on the right. So the people on there's 2 names on the document. Lenka Barabbas, whose maiden name was Schultz, and Paul Barabbas. And the document is an index card. So let's take a look at the card. And again, we get this nice summary on the left. And we find that this document is from the Vienna office. And it's from a list of Hungarian Jewish refugees who fled in 1956, fled the Hungarian Revolution and went to Austria. So the JGC helped these immigrants when they were waiting for resettlement, and they housed 11,000 of them. And this on the card, this card is actually for Paul Barabbas, who's accompanied by Lenka, who's probably his wife, although we can't really tell that. And it tells us that they've departed for Austria on May 28th, 1957. Moving right along. This is another hit from the same document. So this particular document has 3 people's names on it. And this is from the Transmigration Bureau, which accepted deposits so people could support their relatives as they were trying to flee from Europe to overseas. So let's look at the actual document. It's just a card. I can't really tell. There's no way to tell from the card, and I couldn't quite figure out what year it was from. Was it from the early 40s or was it from the later 40s? But the person that was depositing the money is on the right. Looks like his name was Emil Reitler, and he lived at 30 Broad Street, New York. And he was depositing the money on behalf of Anton Reitler and Gertrude and Walter Kanina, who were living in Luxembourg. I think we can see that the joint helped Jewish refugees and Holocaust survivors in different ways, at different times, and in different places. So now let's turn ourselves to the origins of the JDC, which is a great story, and I found it very distracting. We need to go back to the situation of the Jews in Palestine before World War I. The Jewish community was called the Yeshuv. Palestine was ruled by the Ottoman Empire, or Turkey. There were only 59,000 Jews in the Jewish community. They were a disparate lot. Some were religious, some weren't. They were Ashkenazim. They were Jews from North Africa. Some people came in the late 1880s on what's called the first Aliyah. Some came from 1905 to World War I on the second Aliyah. Many were from Russia. Some were Zionists, by no means all of them were, and they were largely dependent on help from abroad. Suddenly, World War I disrupted that support. Now, the American ambassador to Turkey was Henry Morgenthau Sr. He was appointed by President Woodrow Wilson. He really was not sure he wanted to be the ambassador to Turkey. So he was, to sweeten the pot, he was told that he'll be able to help his people. He kind of realized that for a Jew to become ambassador, practically Istanbul was the only place that would be acceptable for Americans, so he accepted. In July 1914, July 12th, we have an article in the New York Times about his visit to Palestine. So when he was ambassador, so he knew he was very familiar with what was going on. Now, unlike many countries in Europe, America did not have any territorial ambitions in Turkey. And although Turkey wasn't too well governed, it was very corrupt, they tried hard to placate any American request because to keep American public opinion happy. Not sure they really succeeded on that. Morgenthau was very well informed by American consuls in Turkey. He was well aware when the Armenian genocide broke out. He personally publicized it. He tried to get the American administration to say something publicly about it, but the government did not speak out about it, and we know what happened. just a couple of weeks after that article, World War I started. This is a very brief timeline. But it started on July 28th with Austria-Hungary declaring war on Serbia. By August 6th, the major countries of Europe were at war with each other, including Russia, France, the United Kingdom, and Austria-Hungary. At the beginning, Turkey was not involved. It was not in the war. It didn't join the war until October 29th when it attacked Russia. But the assistance from abroad was interrupted by the outbreak of the war. It became difficult for ships to travel, and just the communications network broke down. So there was no help available that the Palestinian Jewish community was used to. On August 31st, there was an article in the New York Times about a fundraising meeting by Zionists the previous day, raising money for the Jewish people of Palestine. There was no secret that this was going to happen. Because of America not being involved in the war, American Jews were also in a unique position to help. On that same day the article was published, August 31st, Ambassador Morgenthau sent a telegram to Jacob Schiff, who was a prominent Jewish banker, entrepreneur, and philanthropist, telling him about the crisis in Palestine, that support was desperately needed. And this was rather specific, $50,000 needed. Will you undertake the matter? Signed, Morgenthau. It took less than a month to raise the money. Now, this particular article from 1964 is a good source for the what exactly happened. There were two organizations, the American Jewish Relief Committee, which was secular, and the Orthodox Central Relief Committee, that combined to found the Joint Distribution Committee of American Funds for Jewish War Sufferers, which took place on about October 28th. Later, a third organization joined in 1915. This was a labor organization called the People's Relief Committee. So it turned out very soon that it wasn't only the Jews of Palestine that were affected by World War I. It was really fought, a lot of it was fought in Eastern Europe, where millions of Jews were living. So the Joint responded to that. And one of the things they did is they set up in addition to directly funding projects and sending money to Russia for others to distribute, they enabled people to send money to their families. So this picture is of the picture on the left is from the Transmission Bureau office at 98 2nd Avenue between 5th and 6th Street. You can see people lined up to give their money to the cashier. And then there's a secretary getting more detailed information. If you look in the window, it says on the left, it says over the cashier window, it says cashier in English and Yiddish. And on the right, you're looking out towards the outside, and it's the branch office for transmission of individual remittances. So there was a lot of publicity. This is on the posters to raise money to support the Jews in war-torn Europe. And in this New York Times article on the right from December 25th, 1915, talks about a larger money that was raised in a meeting and all the volunteer effort that went into raising that money. And was very careful to talk about the committee in St. Petersburg that was in charge of distributing the money. This is another article about a meeting that took place in February 1916. Now, instead of hundreds of thousands, we're talking millions of money raised and distributed. Now let's briefly talk a little bit more about the JDC. It was also very active in the immediate post-World War I period. It was incredibly flexible in the way it did things. It helped set up soup kitchens, vocational training, in addition to enabling people to send money to individuals. It worked through other organizations. It's just an incredibly flexible organization. Now, of course, Eastern Europe was poor, and Soviet Russia was even worse off. Under communist control, the only way the joint could work was to actually set up an organization under the umbrella of Soviet authorities. It was called Agro Joint, and it enabled the Joint Distribution Committee to continue to send money to Russia. And this went on up until about 1937, when the NKVD, the Soviet secret police, issued an order on the arrest of German subjects suspected of espionage against the USSR, which led to the arrests of many people who had lived in Germany. And that included the 17 staff members of the Joint Distribution Committee who were arrested, accused of espionage and counter-revolutionary activities, and killed. The JDC almost closed its doors, and then with the advent of Hitler, it had more work to do. As Germany acquired more countries, this created, in addition to German Jewish refugees, and created refugees from Austria and Czechoslovakia, and the Joint stepped up to the plate. It continued to work during the Holocaust, partly in secret, and its activities continued after World War I, both in Europe and anywhere Jews needed help. That included helping Soviet Jewry, including, among other things, sending matzah to the Jews during the 1970s in the Soviet Union. The JDC still exists. It's still active. It has its own homepage at jdc.org. The archives have a separate homepage at archives.jdc.org. You can get some of these search features from the homepage of the organization, but you have many more options in searching from the archives. So this is the homepage of the archives. At the top, there are 4 links. So let's take a close look at that. So the choices are stories, collections, about us, and database. So let's start with collections. So when you go to collections, one of the collections they have is, one of the things you notice about their websites, both of them, is frankly, they're full of pictures. Now, pictures look good, but if you want to do business, they kind of get in the way. But if you scroll down on this collection page, one of them is the photo collection, and there's a search box. This is the list of what you might find on what you will find on the collection page. So there are 4 collections that have search boxes for photographs, text, names index, 3 actually, and then there's links to other information. So let's do a name search. I haven't picked this name out of a hat, but let's search the name Mutterpearl. Their index names, and they have at least 500,000 names in the index. And the material right now goes from 1914 to 1973. They're not finished, and there's still many more things that will be added to the archives. Lists now might include remittance files, a list that include cash or parcels, people that were prisoners of war in Siberia in 1921, emigration records, records from Shanghai rabbinical students from 1947, and immigration records to Latin America from 1948, et cetera, et cetera. So now let's go back to our search. So if we search Mutterpearl using that box, we get 6 hits. I've blown them up slightly on the right. Each item is linked to an original document. Now, in these hits, there's 5 different types of hits. Poland remittances, Vilna refugees, Transmigration Bureau, beneficiaries of free parcels, and an index card. Now, there's more than one way to search, so let's look at the next slide. Let's go now to database. So when you open the database, you land on the quick search page. Again, there's a menu at the top that has 4 items on the left. We're on the quick search. Other choices are advanced search, hierarchical, and collection highlights. Well, let's start with the quick search. So we're going to do the same search for Mutterpearl. And doing it this way, we've got 4 hits. Now let's go to the next tab and look at the advanced search. So in this, in the advanced search, you can choose to search all fields, or you can confine it by the photo subjects, by the decade, by the location, date, photo keywords, and the creator. On the right, we see there's some advanced options, which include the language we're searching and the language of the content, the ways of sorting, Boolean terms, and view options. The minute I saw Boolean terms, I realized advanced was too advanced for me. So we'll keep with the basic search. The other angle is that you could search just the photo collection, or by clicking all these boxes, you could search what appeared to be all the collections. It's not clear that that's what that means, but I think that's what it means. The other wrinkle is these all say literal search, but actually they are options, and each field has different options for searching. So for example, in the search all fields, you can search in 2 different ways, literal or fuzzy. But you go down to the photo location, you can search in 6 ways. I'm honestly not sure what the difference is between literal and exact. This is the only place where you can search phonetically, which is close as we're going to get to a sounds by search, and so on. So depending on which field you put the search in, you have more ways of searching. So let's proceed. So we'll search Muda-Pearl, we'll search all the collections, and we'll be very fuzzy about this. And what are we getting? 1, 2, 3. We're getting the 6 hit we got in the first time. So that implies that the first time we did this, where we didn't know what kind of search we were doing, was fuzzy. But there's no way you would know that, because there's no way that it tells you that that's what you're doing. So let's analyze that. Actually, let's try something else. Again, we're searching all the choices. We're going to search location. We're going to search dog shits, which is a shtetl, or dog shitsi, which is a shtetl I'm very interested in. Now, actually, in Polish and Russian, it would be dog shitsi, and that would be a better way to search this. I'm going to search phonetically. And now, doing it this way, I got 9 hits, but 6 of them are from the same location. And actually, it's not dog shits, it's someplace called Życie, Poland. But just to tell you what you get when you look, we're looking at one of the hits. So you get a description of the document. It's a list of Jews in Poland who receive parcels by orders via the JDC's Jerusalem office in 1946 and 47. We can click on the actual document. The document is part of a list, so if we want, we could look at the whole list. So let's just look at one of those names. So this is one of those hits from Dziatozuchi. The person's name is Wolf Feugl. He was born on August 15th, 1928. Let's look at the actual document. So you can see this document has got a title in English, Orphan Children from Buchenwald, now in Paris. The next line is in French, Enfants venus d'Allemagne, Convoi de 8 June 1945. Children coming from Germany, the convoy from June 8th, 1945. The following line leads au marqué d'une croix sont partis pour la Palestine. Did I say pardon my French? The ones marked with the cross have left for Palestine. On the right, we see the listing for Wolf Feugl, which includes his place of birth and town and country, and so on. So when you come down to it, I'm left with 2 names from dog shits, or dog shitsi. The first one says David Schliefer. Well, my father was born near dog shits, and some members of my father's mother's cousin's family married a Schliefer. So this looks familiar. So here we have my family tree. This shows that Pasek David Schliefer's wife was Kayla Reitman. They both were born in dog shits, and they died in Connecticut. Now here's the actual document that shows that the document the inquiry was from Kyla Schliefer, who was living in Dogshitsi in the Minsk gubernia. She was asking to locate and forward the enclosed letter to David Schliefer, her husband, who was living at RFD. Does everyone know what RFD stands? You can put it in the chat. Number 3 in Norwich, Connecticut. In the next listing on that page, we have Eva Wodiat, who's a wife living in it's probably Colony Belichtiki in the Volvitz gubernia, and she and her 6 children are in grave need. Please locate husband and ask him to send support. The husband, she thought, was living in Garnet, Indiana. Now, the other listing was for somebody named Simon Aronon, who was sending money or remitting something to Rose Lottie Markman. If we click through, we see that the document is remitter. It's described as guarantees from the Mira Lubavitcher Yeshivas in support of finding safe havens in Canada from 1941. That's a mistake, because we know that from below that the date of the document is between 1916 and 1917. The interesting thing here is we can expand the remitter details and the beneficiary details, which I've already done. So this gives us most of the information that's on the original document. Who was sending the money and who was hopefully going to receive the money. And so Rosie Lottie Markman was living in Dogshitsi, which was in the Minsk gubernia in Russia. And if we click through, this is a nicely topped document, and we can see that the date was November 28th, 1917. He was sending $5, which is probably $50 to $100 or even $200 now. So it's, and what's interesting is to note the other places on this page where money was being sent to. So that includes Minsk, Berdyshev in the Kiev gubernia, Shatava in the Podolia gubernia, Bugoslav in the Kiev gubernia, and Gomel in the Mogilev gubernia. Well, using Ancestry, I was able to create a family tree for Simon Aronon. He was married to Rosa Markman, so I'm assuming the person he was sending money to was related to his wife. Now, once you do that, of course, you can look for other people who have trees that mention Simon Aronon, who was living in Wisconsin, but he moved around a lot. So we did that, and I got a nice reply from a woman named Sandra Gilmore, who told me she loved my find on Simon Aronon, who was in her husband's family. And according to her, Rabbi Leib Aronon, who was Simon's father, had 10 children. I have one final example. When we were searching Muderpearl, one of the hits was for Joseph Muderpearl, who was also remitting money to Mrs. Rivka Mutterpearl. So let's look at that. The document is a little hazy, but we can still read it. This was dated January 19th, 1919. So Joseph Murderpearl was sending $50, which might be the equivalent of $500 today or more, to Mrs. Rivka Mutterpearl, who lived in Dogshitsi, Minsk Gubernia. She was 44 years old, and she had 6 children. Let's see what we can do with this family. Well, for one thing, I found the ship's manifest. So Rivka and her 6 children arrived in New York on November 19th, 1921. They had sailed from Bremen on November 5th. I was able to create a family tree, and it turns out that Rivka Murderpearl's maiden name was Anselevitz. Now that last name sounds very familiar. Mordecai Anselevitz, and this is very close to Anselevitz, was the commander of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Kibbutz Yad Mordecai was named after him. He was born in Warsaw. Now, according to this entry from the Yad Vashem, at the outside of the war, he fled from Warsaw to Vilna, and so on. Now, I happen to know through my extensive involvement with Dogshits that Mordecai Anselevitz had relatives in Dogshitsi, and during this time period, when he fled to Vilna, he visited his relatives in Dogshitsi. Could Rebecca Anselovitz Mutterpearl be related to Mordecai Anselevitz? I don't have the proof yet, but I think it's quite likely. That's the end of my presentation. So we're going to disable screen sharing. And I hope you survived.
Aaron, thank you very much. We've got a few questions in the chat. The first one, I think, is how one searches the JDC database. Is there a login? Is it free? Do you have to make a donation?
Good question. No, there's no login. There's no charge. So it's just a matter of stumbling through and figuring out the best way to do a search, and maybe do it more than one way, I would say. So it's quite accessible.
Well, you've really covered the kinds of things that the Joint has done over the years, and the techniques that you've used with the Joint site, and then with other services such as Ancestry to trace people after you found them in the Joint database. What is the Joint doing today?
I believe this is all on their homepage, but I think they continue to help both Jewish and non-Jewish refugees and populations in need. So they're still active. And if I might add, which I should have said, it's very impressive what the Joint did over its existence. And what's also impressive is that this organization has existed for such a long time period. So many organizations fold, so many organizations don't preserve or lose their archives. And the fact that the Joint preserves so many archives is a tremendous testament to the leadership and the way this organization was run.
Here's a question. How did the Joint find the people to whom the money was being sent? So people in small shtetls all over Europe, how did the joint find them so that they got the money? And how did they find people in the US who might have moved from the address their relatives in Europe had? So
Well,
how did they make
they either worked, they had their own employees and they had other organizations in Europe, or they worked through other organizations. In the United States, I would say we used to have a pretty good mail system that forwarded the mail, but I could see from looking at the documents that in fact, they did not find everybody. I mean, one of the issues in Eastern Europe is, for example, that as Russia got more involved with the war, the army decided that Jews might be pro-German, and on that basis, many Jews in what is Belarus were forced to move further into Russia. So in fact, I'm sure many of the donations never found many of the things that were going to specific people never quite made it.
when that happened, do you know if the money was refunded?
I think it looks to me like from the one example I saw that yes, they kept track and they kept track of money that wasn't delivered, and they probably did. I don't know, but I suspect that they did refund it.
And I imagine they had ways of converting the currency.
Right. What the problem they solved was not right. And many of the documents, in fact, they list the money in dollars and rubles, for example. The issue was not converting the money. The issue was really the fact that the whole problem was that communications were extremely cut and those commercial links were broken by war,
Yes.
especially World War
I. Faye Buscane points out that the joint helped Jews in Poland after the war and after the fall of communism as well. Do you know if there was a connection between the joint and Hayes?
I don't know specifically, but the joint was very practical, and it would work with any organization it had to help people. So it wouldn't surprise me if they worked together at different points in time.
And
the joint was also involved with the St. Louis, the cruise liner that tried to land people in Cuba and the United States. Eventually, when the ship eventually returned to Europe, it helped to resettle many of the people on the ship. But that was in Europe, of course. And many of them still died in the Holocaust.
May I interject for a second? I know they also sent food packages. It wasn't only money. I had found a document through the JDC that food packages were sent to different concentration camps during the Holocaust. So they did other things besides monetary transactions.
Right. They also at the end of World War I, there was real poverty, and they helped set up soup kitchens. They fed, in fact, at the end of World War I, maybe in the early 1920s, they fed millions of people.
During the Holocaust, they actually supplied monies illegally to people trying to emigrate from Germany who were still stuck there after they closed their borders. And so they provided sustenance for people who went underground on their way out, so that they could survive until they got to some border and could bribe somebody. So that was, and they got out thousands of people out of Germany during the war. I was just reading a book about the Jews of Berlin, which describes it.
Can I make a comment on this?
Sure.
My family were Holocaust survivors after the war. They were originally in Poland, and they fled east. And by the time I was born in Azerbaijan. After the war, they made their way back to Warsaw, and they made their way back to Refugee Collection Center where the joint was. And the joint helped them in writing letters and making contacts to relatives that they knew had gone to the United States before the war or had gone to Israel, and they helped them making those connections. From that refugee collection center, they put us into displaced persons camps in Austria. And while in Austria, they helped making connections back to the United States to help us find a way to get out of the DP camps into back in the United States. So they were helpful in many ways. I've written a book on this. They're a significant part of my book.
Fred, why don't you tell everybody the name of the book?
The name of the book is The Story Keeper, Weaving the Threads of Time and Memory. It's going to be published in January.
On International Holocaust Memorial Day.
On International Holocaust Memorial Day.
So we should all keep our eyes open for it.
I'll send you a link.
Thank you. So here's a question. Was there a connection between the Joint and the Red Cross?
Well, I didn't see any mention of it, but I honestly didn't totally drill down on the history of the Joint, which is a little difficult on the internet, actually. I'm not aware of one, but that doesn't mean there wasn't.
Yeah.
Once again, let me stress, the Joint was extremely flexible. It had no problem working with other organizations. It had no problem switching to illegal operations as needed during World War II. And I'm sure they did that when they were trying to help the Soviet Jewry also.
Is there a central list of the people who made deposits, or does one just search the database for the list for a name, and then it would come up either as a recipient or as a depositor?
Well, the JDC had numerous offices, and there are it looks to me like there are numerous lists. So if there's a central list, I doubt that. I mean, it would be a computerized thing anyways.
Sure.
It doesn't look to me, they didn't have one big list. It just wasn't in the first place. A lot of this was done, all of this stuff that's on this, that's in the archives, was done before people were using computers. I think they're only up to the early 70s as far as scanning things in. So, I mean, if there was one list, it would be a pretty long list. I'm sure there isn't one.
Do people have other questions?
I just wanted to say this was a fantastic lecture. I've done lots of research on my family history besides genealogy, but one of the places that I really didn't look was at the Joint. And after this lecture, that's where I'm going. Thank you, Aaron.
Well,
Is the book finished, or are you going to be putting more in?
Well, thank you. That's very nice. You'll be happy to know that I finished it at 5:15 today.
I'd like to add something.
Sure.
The Joint was one of the organizations that helped to help people in Europe try to find people in the United States. Our organization did the Seeking Kin database, and the Joint was one of the groups, in addition to HIAS, etc., that tried to reunite people at different periods of time.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments to make at this time? And you all know how to unmute yourself to ask a question?
I just wondered what Aaron's email was in case we want to get in touch with him.
It's aaron.ginsburg@gmail.com.
Aaron, why don't you put it in the chat?
I'm doing that
Or
now.
put your JGSGB one in there.
Right.
Well, I don't know that off the top of my
Well,
head.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Can you repeat your personal one, please?
So,
That's aaron.ginsburg@gmail.com.
yeah.
Aaron with two
Of course,
A's.
you have to spell Aaron right and Ginsburg right.
The one,
The dot is optional in case you didn't know.
the one that's in the chat is Aaron's JGSGB. It's just GINSBURG@jgsgb.org.
And that gets forwarded to his personal email.
Now, if only I could only get the rest of my Ginsburg relatives to spell the last Ginsburg the right way.
It's because my grandmother was a Ginsburg.
My wife is a Ginsburg. Spelled with a U, the way you do.
Yep, same way.
Aaron,
Yes.
were there any Ginsburgs from your family that ended up in Worcester, Mass? Because there are a couple, there's one still surviving. Actually, he's got kids.
The answer is Ginsburg is a very common last name. My Ginsburgs are from Globoki, which is now in Belarus. And my part of the Ginsburg family moved about 20 miles south to Parfyanova. And that's as far back as I can go.
Well, what about in
But
the
we
States?
still could be related though.
Well, actually, I'm not related to them, but the what's his name? Herb Ginsburg that lives around the corner from me. He's probably 75 to 80, maybe a little older, but his dad was a plumber, and his dad and my dad were friends, and he used to do the plumbing in our house, and most of the Jewish families, you know, they called him, and his name was Morris. And my brother's first wife married a Ginsburg. No, my brother's first wife's cousin. Anyhow, maybe you're related, maybe you're not.
I have to relate to you what Aaron told me years ago when I first met him. And I told him that my grandmother was also a Ginsburg and also from Belarus. He said, Ginsburg, the name Ginsburg is like Smith in Belarus.
Oh.
So, you know, remember that, Aaron?
I doubt I said in Belarus.
Well, maybe not you may not have said that, but I think that was the gist of it anyway.
I love what Beth Levine put in the chat.
Me too.
Yeah, she just happens to be my sister.
Oh, thank you everyone for setting this up. I know nothing about technology, and wow, I'm in love with Zoom. And but don't ask me for anything higher than, you know, passwords.
Well, you did a fine job. You're
Is it-
here.
Thank you. I love this group, and there's so many Jewish things to connect with lately. It's I've got more of a social life in my kitchen on Zoom than I had out of the house.
Well, I'm glad that we can be part of it. And Aaron, I want to thank you also for stepping forward and doing another wonderful program for us. We really do appreciate that. And thank you, Alan, for the introduction and putting it together as well. And I see some thumbs up on my screen. And I hope that you will be joining us Sunday for a program, and the following week or in 2 weeks as well. And go on our website to see what's happening and read our e-announcements and our email. People work very hard to put them together. And we hope that we will see you on our screens, in your kitchens, in your studies, in your dens, wherever you are, very soon. So thank you very much. And whoops, did someone want to say something?
I think you meant almost every room, right?
Yes, almost every room. That's right. You're absolutely correct. So take good care, everyone. And I hope to see you all again soon. Bye-bye. And contact us if you have any ideas that you'd like to share. Presidents@jgsgb.org.